Thank you everybody for being here. I'm really excited to welcome you today to another Foster the Product event. My name is Jeff Schulman, and I am a marketing professor here at the University of Washington's Foster School of Business. And I'm the founding director of the Product Management Center. The Product Management Center would not be possible without our guest, one of our guest speakers today, who is on the founding advisory board, as we built from scratch just this year, a global hub for knowledge, community, and impact. So we've got one more Foster the Product event next month. They were the first Thursday of every month, and we'll hopefully come back next year with even more. And I'd be remiss if I didn't pitch before I got to our guest speaker here, that what she helped me build, which is the Inclusive Product Management Summit. So on May 7th, we're bringing together product managers from around the world to learn about how to manage more inclusive teams and how to build more inclusive products. Foster the Product, I just want to briefly say, Iman, our guest speaker here today, we helped build this. She helped me build this Foster the Product, meant to not just be a chance to learn from some of the best and the brightest, but a chance to connect, a chance to form community with other people who are either product managers at the moment or who are trying to get into product management. So we want to help you not just find knowledge, but really find community. And I've been so excited that I see several of you I've seen time after time after time again, and it's great to welcome you back as we have really the first ever and one of the coolest innovations in Foster the Product history is we're going to have not one, not two, but three guest speakers today talking about how to engage engineering, do's and don'ts for product managers. And so this is especially important for those of you in the business school who may or may not have engineering background, but even if you have an engineering background, you may have left it behind you. And so you're going to be reminded of what you should do and what you shouldn't do. I'm going to introduce my founding advisory board who helped create this whole series and created the Product Management Center. And then she'll introduce the fantastic guest speakers that she brought along with her. So please welcome Iman Barhoumeh.
Thank you, Jeff. Absolutely an honor, and just so amazing to see in such a short amount what you and everyone in the team has been able to accomplish. So welcome everybody. I want to say we have managed to start peace talks between product managers and engineers today, and we have 10 tips that we'd like to share with you. I'm delighted to be here and shared by my dear friends and engineering leaders.
Hi, I'm Suruchi. I'm a senior director at Expedia Group. I've been in the industry 18 years, first 9 in tech consulting and then the second part in product development. I'm here today to keep Iman honest so that we don't make promises that engineers can't keep.
Hey everyone, my name is Jordan Naftalen. I'm a software engineer on Facebook. Prior to Facebook, I was at Microsoft for around 13 years and then at Zillow for 4 years, and I'm delighted to be here.
All right, fantastic. Let's just get started. So it takes a village to build a product. And engineering and product management play such a critical role in building a product. So some of those roles that we play as product managers, we primarily lead, and some engineering primary leads. And there are some roles that we do together. In the beginning, one of the major responsibilities for product managers is goals and setting the mission. And when we do that, we translate into a list of projects that are prioritized that we share and work together with engineering on. And that gets translated into an engineering roadmap that is sequenced for efficiency, sequenced in order to align also with priority of work and the mission itself. The second area in our role is communication. Communication around goals is something that primarily product managers do, and engineers communicate more on technology and technology issues that are happening. And we share communications of results and experimentations that we're doing together. The other area is around execution. The product management managers really primarily help unlock execution, aligning stakeholders, and engineering's might primarily look at execution performance and how we're doing in our code quality. And we share the product quality and make sure that that quality is on par with what the customer expects. So if these are roles, how do we work together so that we have an amazing relationship and really produce these amazing work to our customers? We have 10 tips to share with you, and the way the tips are actually structured is each tip has a benefit for the product managers, and then also a not so obvious tip that the three of us thought would be helpful to share with you. So let's get started. Number one, involve engineers in the vision. When you involve people in the vision, they really creates motivation for them. They feel like they're part of the work. This is theirs. They understand the impact that this work is going to land for the customer or the industry. And when you tell that story, it actually and see it resonate with your team, with your customers, it will give you confidence as a product manager that you are actually heading in the right direction. Engineers want to be part of the vision.
Oh, Iman, that's a good one to start with. 3 years ago, I joined Iman in Expedia when she had this big dream of reinventing travel insurance industry. Yes, she's a visionary product person, and she painstakingly spent months in bringing all of us on board her vision, giving us so much perspective and opportunity to think through the path forward. It was one of the best engineering experiences in my life because I was able to structure the team, the platform, the backlog in line for the next 3 years to achieve that vision. I really doubt if we would have been able to build it right had she not given us all the details and stuck to only the tactical information. So this one's really important.
Suruchi, you're so kind with your words. I honestly, it was such joy to see how when we talked about the vision, we saw engineers build on top of it and make it better and help it resonate and get executed and make it real and show it to the customer. It was really an absolute pleasure to work together on that. So the second tip is do not block engineers from contributing product ideas. We want as product managers the biggest list of ideas so we can find the best ideas that we want to launch. And basically having this culture of ownership that we are sharing with everyone is the team really creates this motivation. Engineers do have great ideas and they want to be able to contribute those ideas.
Yeah, I have a quick story to share. I worked with a PM who was very strict on the PM versus the dev role, and he really didn't want to hear any non-technical ideas from engineers. And I have to say this led to a lot of resentment from the engineers and even to some hostility. And to be honest, some engineers even decided to just try sneaking their features in behind the PM's back, which obviously is less than ideal. So our ask as engineers is please let us help contribute product ideas.
And if we go back to the role, yes, our role is to kind of, help create those product ideas, but it does not mean that we are the sole contributor, Jordan, just like you said, to those ideas. All right, our next do is manage the project, not the engineers. Oh my gosh, it's so important that we as product managers create a vision and inspire people to come and want to work with us on that vision and really trust our engineers to find those appropriate steps that help us actually get there. And it's not easy sometimes to recognize as a product manager, am I really managing the project or the engineer? One tip that helped me is to ask a question, am I talking about the what to do or the why to do? If I'm talking about the why, then I'm managing the project. If I'm talking about the what to do, then I'm possibly managing the engineers.
Yeah, I have something that really resonates with that. We had once a product manager who, instead of explaining what is he trying to achieve with this, he told us that we need to build a machine learning chatbot. And the team scrambled into thinking we need to reskill. Every dev needs to become a machine learning engineer. And then we thought, let's just take a step back. We went back to the PM, understood the idea, what was he trying to do, and we could come up with a real simple data refresh solution rather than the complicated ML that he wanted us to build. Had we marched down the path of the complex tech, that would have neither guaranteed success nor the right utilization of engineering time, not to mention an unmotivated team who felt that they were just taking orders without even knowing what their tech would have solved. So yeah, this one's important for engineers to feel that they're part of what they're building and they know why they're building it.
Suruchi, is great that it sounds like you have a really safe culture where engineers are empowered to ask on the why and potentially find better ideas on how to get there. That is really great. All right, the next step is do empower engineers with a framework to make trade-off decisions. Velocity is really important. We're continuously being pushed to move faster because the industry is moving faster and the customer's expectations are continuously rising. right? And what we can do to help the team increase their velocity is by creating these kind of frameworks that define principles that can be applied when you want to make trade-off decisions. It should not be the burden on our shoulders as product managers that we should make every decision. We can share that responsibility with engineering.
I led a team that's spread across 3 geographies. So sometimes the PMs and my engineering pods are not in the same geography. So to this decision-making framework is paramount to how we operate. Otherwise, my teams would waste all day waiting for the PM in the other geography to come back online, go ahead and give them resolutions for simple conflicts. So if engineers have this framework, they can really power through their work and not wait on simple decisions and waste time.
We are all moving towards global teams where teams are distributed across different geographies. Suruchi, how did that help your team by empowering these different locations?
See, we're in a global world, as you said, right? And for us, follow the sun is important because we have customers around the globe. So having 3 teams in 3 different time zones gives us coverage to be able to provide for our customers around the clock. So for my team's velocity, the 3 geography really works from a time zone perspective, but the PM ideas could come from anywhere, right? So from that perspective, we don't want to restrict people to work with people only in that geography. So that's important for the team to keep flowing.
Great. Our next step is sit in the trenches with the engineers. So go ahead and roll your sleeves and be there in the day-to-day so you actually get to know what's going on. And this is really giving you an opportunity as a product manager, as being part of the day-to-day, to find ways that could not be obvious on how you actually can help. And if you can actually help track that data or find other ways that you can answer the team's questions and unblock, it will increase the team's velocity.
Yeah, I worked with a great PM in the past who we would use the product every day during development. And that he would identify issues and make suggestions as we built it. And he knew exactly what state the product was in without needing to ask us because he was using it every day. And this led to a really successful launch. So I love that he was, in there with us.
And how is that impacting the relationship between products and product managers and engineers, Jordan?
It really helped form a great bond, I think, between the whole engineering team and the PM. Having him be working essentially alongside us and seeing what we were kind of going through and making those adjustments as necessary formed like an awesome bond.
And, being with somebody, even when things are not going well, is actually the best way to build relationships, right? Going into battle with somebody really builds that bond between people in the good times, actually also in the not so good times. All right, let's go to our next step. Use logic rather than emotion when making decisions with engineers. My gosh. So originally when we put the slide together, it said you make data-driven decisions. Well, listen, if you have the data, by all means, use the data because no one can argue with data, right? And if you show the data, you will get automatically buy-in, even for those less interesting work, because the impact of that work would be obvious. But sometimes we do not have that data as product managers. And in that sense, we should have logic and be using logic to clearly explain why we want to make the decision that we want to make. And sometimes I, as a product manager, have self-doubt. Am I doing the right decision here? And hearing myself say that logic out loud and people understanding that logic gives me the confidence personally that we as a team were making the right decision, gives everyone the confidence that we're making the right decision.
Yeah, I'll admit that I've definitely been skeptical of some PM decisions that I've heard in the past. I remember a specific time when a PM was prioritizing a specific feature that I really thought was lower priority. And I had proposed that we focus on a different feature first. But the PM then kind of showed me the data that proved that users would benefit from his prioritization. And like Iman said, it's hard to argue with the data. So after seeing that, I knew that it was the right decision that he was making.
Great. Our next step, do not make technical assumptions. We're encouraged as product managers to understand the technology that we're working on. But sometimes it's really important that we don't make decisions without actually validating assumptions about those decisions. For example, there could be features that we're thinking about that we're putting on the cut list because we're making the assumption that they are too difficult. And in fact, there could be other ways of making these actually easier. On the opposite side, there could be features that we think are simple that we're adding to our product roadmap, but end up consuming a big portion of our capacity. So while we do have the good intention of wanting to make these decisions and prioritize, sometimes those tech assumptions could hinder the product.
In my experience, wrong commitment on delivery date is a very common outcome of PMs, assuming things are easy to build. That leads to teams scrambling to meet timelines, and no doubt that also leads to soaring the relationship massively between product managers. Jordan, what's your experience on this?
Yeah, that's definitely something that I've experienced as well. I've also experienced the flip side, though. I had a PM that I was working with who once cut a feature because of a tech assumption. And luckily, one of the engineers noticed that the feature had been cut in one of our planning meetings, and he asked why. And the PM explained that it was because he knew that it would just be too difficult for us to have implemented, and that's why he cut it. I'll say that the PM was then pleasantly surprised when that feature was implemented by the end of that day.
It is delightful and music to a product manager's ears when the engineer is saying there's easier ways to implement something. So this is really great. All right, our next step, do not keep changing the decision to avoid conflict. You know, it's interesting, like the question is, why would a product manager want to change a decision, right? Obviously, we potentially will get more information, the market conditions are changing. But the question is to be careful about the motivation behind changing the decision. And while we are trying and seeking alignment between everybody, right, we have to be careful that it's not about making everyone happy on the team and aligned. It's about doing what's right for the customer. And if you anchor on that, you're actually going to get more respect from your development team because you're maintaining your ground and you're holding on what everybody is aligning on, which is the customer.
Yeah, I have one story, and then it's kind of stuck with me for many, many years. I worked with a PM who had put together a spec outlining how a specific feature would work, and I noticed something that I didn't think made sense. And so I suggested that he change it, and he kind of happily and quickly agreed. But the next day I discovered that the spec had changed again to something completely different. And so I asked him why, like what was going on. And he had kind of mentioned that another dev had come and spoken to him and had given a different suggestion. So he had changed it. And then the PM said, but I'm happy to change it back to whatever you want, Jordan, if I wanted. And to be honest, that response made me really frustrated rather than happy. I kind of lost respect, and it's just not the way that it didn't kind of instill any confidence in me that we were doing the right thing.
Jordan, how does changing things impact engineering?
I mean, changing things in general is, sometimes it's necessary as long as we kind of know what the purpose of it is. I'll also just add one little tidbit that one of the things that I don't think the PM did best in this situation was he didn't communicate the change properly. So when I had made the change and then another engineer had asked him to change it, I didn't know about it until I just happened to spot it. So I just wanted to call that out as well, that when you are making changes, I highly recommend communicating that change so everyone's kind of aware. And then if there's any kind of differences that are there, the right people can kind of get together to kind of hash it out.
Right. Our next step is pay attention to tech debt. So as product managers, we're consistently thinking about the customer and wanting to add more and more features that we think are beneficial. And the thing is, we're trying to move faster, but the question is, can we move faster if we actually think more about our platform and our technology? Because if we do focus on that, it actually will increase the productivity and we will potentially get more additional features down the line. Honestly, in all the engineering relationships that I had in the past, we actually had an allocation for tech debt that we all agreed upon, and it's basically really focused on clearing up that backlog so that we are actually having our ability to move faster.
I have a story actually, which could sort of tell the dilemma the product managers had. We were once building a global supply platform for a travel product, And obviously, when you're building a platform of that scale, there were a lot of compromises made to get to the MVP. But as soon as the MVP was done, the engineering team was keen to clear the tech debt, but the PM kept putting small A/B tests in our backlog. So when we confronted him, two things came out. One, the PM had no clue that clearing tech debt is going to help us accelerate on features that he wanted. Two, he felt that it would be held against him if he's not giving any product story for every sprint. So I think it also, it needs a conversation to know if the PM's coming, where the PM is coming from, so that you can also help put him at ease and explain as engineers that why tech debt is at the end for the betterment of the product itself.
Gosh, Suruchi, I wish there was a better name for tech debts and make it like more appeal, maybe tech accelerator or something like that can, but I think it's really critical. For those of us who don't know what tech debt is, can you give us a short description? What is tech debt?
Imagine if you're trying to, let's say, build a pricing engine, right? The cool thing would be to do is to build an automated engine that takes in changes of prices, and there is a configuration tool that PMs could go and change prices as they see fit in market. But that's something that typically engineers won't go and build a cool technology for it day one because we don't know the use. So a tech debt would be that we'd put a manual system behind it, that you give us an Excel file and we'll upload the prices. But eventually we would want to clear that out with proper signals from customers, from price changing and everything, and we put an automated system behind it. So those are the things that get cleared in the system with as we learn the system.
Thank you, Suruchi. And for our final please share the project success with everyone on the team. Everyone will feel encouraged and they want to be in the limelight. You know, as product managers, we are often seen as the face of the project, face of the product, and including everybody in the successes and celebrating is actually going to really bring that joy back to the team.
I remember we were once building a brand new platform for notifications, and the engineering team was super proud of it for building something that scaled across lines of business, geographies, and everything. However, when it went live, the PM only celebrated the feature idea and ignored the tech marvel behind it. The team felt so cheated, and there was a real lack of motivation to continue working on that pod. So yes, PMs, please share the success. I mean, I'll leave the Will Smith dancing to you, but appreciate the effort that engineers are putting to building it.
Yeah, Suruchi, I fortunately have a much happier example. I worked with a fantastic PM who was always encouraging the engineers to showcase their work during presentations, and who would mention engineers by name and all hands for their contributions. And I'll say that engineers just loved working with this PM just because of the the success sharing that they brought to the team.
All right, I will definitely do that dancing, Suruchi, and that brings us to a question section.
Okay. Are you assuming someone other than a PM is doing the work of researching and communicating market problems and opportunities? So I guess maybe put another way is who does the researching and communicating the market problems and opportunities is the question we have here.
So depending on the company size, I want to say this could be either a role that a product manager would do or a role that a market researcher would do. In a company like Facebook, we have a dedicated discipline who does the market research, and also there's another discipline that does user research. And the product manager's role is to take insights out of both of those research and figure out, along with the team, how do we basically turn this into a product?
All right, thank you. So our next question here is, can you speak more to number 4? So you had the number 4 is empowering engineers to have a framework to make decisions. Do you have any specific examples of kind of how that framework was and examples that either worked or maybe didn't work? Any more additional examples you can give there?
Let's see.
Iman, do you want to take an example from frameworks we've used?
Sure.
So simple things like if engineers understand as to how to pivot their conflicts on, in the sense that what's important, the customer, the product, or the platform, right? So if you agree on a common framework to say that what are the reasons where you would first prioritize what's the right customer experience we're looking for, and is that up for compromise or not? Or if you agree that, hey, the product will scale slowly, so in the beginning we could have a manual solution, but eventually after the MVP we want a automated scaling solution or something like that. So if you have that right framework of at what point of time what is important, when engineers are building the story, they know what is the compromise they can make and how they can scale up their engineering effort as they go along. So those are the things that if known upfront, if you know the value system on what you're basing your product life cycle on, you'd be able to take those decisions yourself, these compromises yourself, to not wait and ask for permission or, so to say, agreement on how to go forward. You'd understand if you know the premise of the product story.
All right. So other ways to think about this as well is, for example, sometimes when we use principles is we prioritize, resolving issues and prioritizing work that could be applicable across multiple areas. So if we had to make a decision between a feature that was applicable to one area in our product versus multiple areas in our product, we automatically don't need to be involved. We will prioritize the features that are more generalized and applicable across multiple of those areas. There's also principles that we've used, for example, that we will not compromise, for example, on customer care. If there is anything like a feature that will increase the customer care cost, when I say customer care, I mean the support cost of your own product. If these are the agents that are on the phone, then that would be like a principle that we would have. We would not increase the cost of support. Or another way to think about that same principle is that every single support scenario for us has to provide an automated way so that the customer can self-serve. These are 3 examples of principles that we have used in the past.
All right, thank you. So we have a lot of questions coming in. Keep them coming. And then if you don't get your question answered in this time, we do have, we continue the community on LinkedIn. So join the link, the Foster the Product LinkedIn group, and you could get your questions answered by Iman. Maybe we can convince Jordan and Suruchi to hop into that LinkedIn group and answer questions as well, or your peers can. But here we have Diana asking, how do you get a feature above the line if you don't have evidence that it will improve cost savings or improve revenue? So what other ways can you get that feature? What other data can you bring into that decision to get that feature above the line?
Listen, if you have data on why this is going to be impactful for the customer or for the business, by all means, you're going to use that data to actually do the prioritization. But sometimes you don't. And what you don't is to ask yourself the question, right? Is this aligned with our vision? That would be one. So even though you don't have the data, ask yourself that question, is it aligned with our vision? Number 2, is this the right thing to do for our customer? Right? So I would use a sample of these 2 questions, potentially more, to kind of answer that question, because sometimes as a team this is the right thing to do. You might not have the right data yes to actually measure it, but when you do launch it and try it out, you will get that data and you will validate your hypothesis that this is the right thing to do.
This is from Henry, and he's wondering about, you talked about working in the trenches. And the question is, if you don't have technical product experience or coding experience, what are some ways that you could successfully work in the trenches without slowing the progress by asking too many questions or hindering the development?
I'll take this one. So, I mean, when we were discussing kind of like, getting in the trenches with the engineers, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're coding or helping out technically, but at least in the example that I gave of a really successful PM was that they were with us, using the product as it was kind of being built. So I guess the difference here is I've had some PMs that I've worked with who, maybe will write the specs and kind of like pass it over the fence and let engineers then go ahead and build it while they're kind of only thinking about what comes next. And what we're calling out here is that rather than just doing that, like toss it over the fence to the engineers, work with the engineers and see what it is that they're building and use the product as it's being built, because that's going to foster, a bonding experience that's going to be really good for everybody, and will give you that advantage of knowing exactly where the product is. So if you are a coder and as a PM and you want to get involved in the tech, by all means, go for it. But the point here wasn't necessarily that you're going to be contributing technically, but that you're going to be, working alongside the engineers in, experiencing the product as it's being built.
And this, oh, sorry, go ahead, Iman.
Just saying, it's okay to ask, what is the purpose of this technology? How does it help?
I'll also add one more small tip, sorry, which is that as an engineer, when PMs do ask me questions about the technology, I kind of love it. I love being able to kind of share what's going on. And to be honest, just sometimes discussing it with someone else who may not be technical can sometimes even lead to, better ideas on how to implement it. So please, from my perspective, please feel free to ask the questions.
Speaking of questions, I had to take the bait there. We have two questions that are fairly similar from Yen and Neha. As business needs are changing or clients keep asking for more and more or different changes to what you're delivering to them, how do you keep morale going and how do you balance the engineers' need for some stability and being able to understand what's coming next and a changing business environment and a changing customer needs or requests?
I think that, see, it's ideal that nothing changes. I mean, engineers like to take their requirements and then go into their deep dens to go code and design, but it's not how it works, right? So we understand that the requirements would change, but it's better if we explain how it will help the product, why is it changing and why is it imperative to change. That's when engineers can believe it in and be mindful and understanding of why the changes are coming. But if you just throw the change over the fence, that's where it leads to conflict, where we as engineers don't understand why this could not have been thought through before and why is the change coming now. So that's the recurring theme of this whole conversation, that PMs and engineers have to work hand in hand all the time throughout the life cycle so that we can understand the changes, the decisions that both the teams are taking and feel like one team.
And I would give 2 tips additionally to what Suruchi has said. Number 1 is, if you want to make a change, make sure that that change will result in a huge impact. Otherwise, do not make the change. That's number 1. And number 2 is just make sure that when you want to make a change, that you avoid it if you can by planning early enough.
And this one's from Bonnie. If teams include an engineering manager and a product manager, does the product manager just deal with the engineering manager, or does the product manager also get involved and connect with the engineers themselves?
The trenches have everyone. So I'd say that talk to everyone in the sense that, yes, you may be dealing with the EM more in the sense when you're asking for progress, when you're trying to understand the status and everything. It's better to talk to the EM on the overall and not disturb the engineers on those details. But when you're discussing features, as Jordan said, the engineers are passionate about what they're building, what they own as features, and those conversations with the engineers directly would benefit both of you.
Anything to add, Jordan or Iman?
Yeah, I'll just echo what Suruchi said, but also kind of call out that as an engineer, I want to have a relationship with the PM. Like, I don't want that to just go through my manager. Part of that, one of the slides we had was like, sharing the vision and stuff. And if it's kind of getting passed through and filtered through somebody else, it doesn't have the same effect. So at least for me, being able to kind of interact directly with the PM that's maybe owning a feature that I'm responsible for implementing really helps me understand things a lot better than when it has to get filtered through someone else.
A general rule that would help, if you're talking about multiple features, work with the EM. If you talk about specific feature, work directly with the dev responsible.
How often, so can you talk about involving engineers in the vision? How can you bring some more context to how you do it in a way that makes them involved in the discussions, but that doesn't bog you down with too many voices?
When you start to formulate the vision, the first step of that is to kind of bring the team together and do a brainstorm. So this is a great perspective to kind of understand what that is. That's one. Another area is when you're thinking about the vision, it's important to level set the team, which means that you basically describe the state of the union. What is the current status of the product, the customer, the competition? It empowers people with information that helps them contribute more to the vision. So level setting with the team, involving them in the brainstorming and formulating of the vision. Those are two ways that can help.
And this final question is a little bit more for those who are PMs, and it's more philosophical. This is from Vinod, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but what do you think the optimal kind of responsibilities of a PM? Since you're since we've got some senior leadership here, do you feel that PMs should be more outward facing and focused more on research and strategic thinking and understanding customers, and that somebody else could then take on this internal facing work, such as like a product owner? Or do you think that PMs should be kind of have their hands in all of this?
I want to say it actually is both, but depending on the cycle, you'll do different things. So if you're in the planning stage, you are going to be thinking more outward, thinking about the market, thinking about the competition, thinking about more the customer. And then as you start to move in your cycle, you want to pay attention to how the team is doing. You are responsible to make sure that the team is executing well towards launching the product that you intended to.
And then any perspective from Jordan or Suruchi on what you'd like to see a product manager responsible for or not responsible for?
I think Iman kind of alluded to this a little bit before, that it probably also is a factor of the size of the company. In some cases, I think when there's not too many PMs in the company, or a lot of people in the company in general, that you're going to have to wear a lot more hats. And when the company is a little bit larger and even more scope and more features, then it might be you might have more specific roles that you need to play. My personal philosophy is that I think that people have passions on what they like to work on, and so I've seen certain PMs that have both of those skill sets and want to do both, and sometimes there's PMs that have one or the other, and forcing them to do both if they don't really enjoy both is not always the best option, the best choice for a company. So my philosophy here is letting people do what they like best is often the best strategy when possible.
The only thing that I'd say is that it goes hand in hand, right? If you're doing market research and if you bring back that back to the engineers when you're in that phase of development, I think that helps the engineers. And if you know how the product is being built, you'll be able to talk to the customer and research the market better because you know how your product internally works. So I would think that it goes hand in hand, that PMs are involved in both, it would benefit.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you to all three of our fantastic speakers who really crystallized with some very specific takeaways, but also gave a nice context and really helped bring it to life with these practical examples. So please give a round of applause to them. And one of the things that they said is, managing these teams inclusively. Sorry, I'm saying that now, but they're talking about managing the teams, bringing engineers and everybody on board in this vision and having a voice and really celebrating the wins. And so if you want to learn how to manage those teams inclusively, come to the Inclusive Product Management Summit, which is on May 7th. The Inclusive Product Management Summit is a chance to learn from other experts and about how to manage teams inclusively and how to build inclusive products. And if you're an engineer, a product manager, or want to get into either of those, I highly encourage you to come and learn from professors and learn from other practitioners. That concludes yet another Foster the Product event. Again, we're not just a chance to learn from some of the greatest product leaders in the business. We're a chance to form community. We're in this together, a chance to learn, to connect, and develop our skills together. No matter what level you are, you should always be learning. That's what I teach my students, ABL, always be learning. And I'm really glad that you came here to learn from our speakers and from each other. We're back here next month. We have Heather Ratcliffe, who is a Senior Director of Product and Technology at T-Mobile. And she's going to be talking about a very important subject, removing bias from the product. And so that's free and open to the public on May 6th, Thursday at 4:30 p.m. And then we have the Inclusive Product Management Summit on May 7th. I can't tell you enough that this is going to be such a fantastic event. sponsored by Axon, sponsored by Qualtrics, by Smartsheet, and by Amazon. So it's your chance to get connected with people from those wonderful companies. We've got guest speakers from Netflix, Amazon, Facebook, Google, any company you've heard of that you would want to work for. We can't get them all in there actually, but we've got some amazing companies represented, vice presidents and directors and such amazing product leaders presenting. We'll have chances to connect with each other like you just did, and we'll have professors giving some of the best practices in managing inclusive teams and building inclusive products. Join that LinkedIn group, be a part of this community going forward, and know that the Foster School of Business has created the Product Management Center, a global hub for knowledge, community, and impact. And it's got the strength of our professors, of our students and our alumni, but it's open to everybody. And that we really strongly believe that creates some valuable connections that can help you in your career. So thanks for joining us. I hope to see you next month. And thank you again to our wonderful guest speakers. Please give them a round of applause. And I hope to see you on LinkedIn, and I hope to see you next month.